Hey, Driven Autism Dads, it's Kyle Jetzel. Hey, today I want to talk about something I think is pretty interesting for me. So, you may or may not know this, but my wife and I were married for 30 years. We had initially and during the early stages of our marriage, we had kind of a rocky relationship, and I say that, our relationship was pretty dang good until our kids on the autism spectrum came along. And because of the way we managed the situation, it created so much stress and turmoil that it caused a rift between my wife and I. And our relationship was on the edge of destruction. I've told the story about leaving my family, just leaving, and decided not to do that, and through a lot of effort we were able to create a curriculum and repair our relationship, my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my typical kids, even my relationship with my kids on the autism spectrum, through a lot of effort and work. And ultimately what it did was it brought my wife and I so close together. That struggle and working through that and creating a plan and working that plan and working together created for my wife and I what we called a top 1% happy marriage. And it was always a dream of mine to have that. And so my wife and I had that. And the reason I say we were married for 30 years is because my wife passed away suddenly about a year ago. And I want to tell you two things. One is kind of a fun thing, and the other's a little bit more serious about my wife and I. The first thing is when at one point my wife and I decided it was time to change banks. The bank that we had been working with for years and years had been bought out, and we weren't really happy with the way things were going, and we really didn't want to do it because, moving your money around is annoying, takes forever, it's just a hassle. So we called over to a new bank and we said, hey, we want to move our money, tell us what we need to do. And we did some stuff, and then we went in together and sat in front of one of these bankers at this new bank, and it took a long time, it was a lot of effort, but we actually had the banker herself do everything, right? We just signed papers, we were there to make sure it worked out right. But my wife and I, at that point, after 25 years of marriage, had a really good marriage. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of understanding. There was a lot of love and kindness between the two of us. We'd been through a lot together, and that had really brought us closer. And so, as we were finishing up, the girl behind the desk, I think she was maybe in her late 20s, early 30s. She said to my wife, she said, "Are you guys newlyweds?" And my wife started laughing. And she said, "No, we've been married for 25 years. And the lady said, she said, "You know what? The way you guys talk to each other and just banter back and forth made me think that I can tell you're so in love with each other. And it's rare for that not to be like the first year of a marriage, Typically, a lot of married couples that come in here that have been married for a while aren't like you guys." And my wife just smiled real big, and she knew and I knew that we had a top 1% happy marriage, and it was kind of refreshing for both of us that somebody else saw the deep love and kindness we had for each other, and we really, really liked each other too. So as we hopped in the car to leave, my wife said, "I think we may have just restored that girl's faith in marriage." And she smiled really big, and I can picture her doing that. But there was a time, and it probably was about that time, at about 25 years of our marriage, that I started to have a thought that was kind of a little disconcerting for me. And it was this, one of the things that I had done for my wife and for our family was that my wife didn't handle the stress in some. She didn't handle some sorts of stress as well as I did, and so I took on those specific areas so that she didn't have to. Right? My wife was really good at some things, and I was really good at some things. And some of those things that I was really good at, and I'll give you a real clear example, is that I had instructed the teachers at school, when something good happens with my son on the autism spectrum, my more severe son, I want you to call my wife and tell her the good. I said, when something bad happens, I want you to call me and tell me so I can manage the bad, and I want you to fill her with good. And so I'll give you one example. There was multiple times where I would get calls at work or wherever I was at, and they would say, your son he's out of control, he needs help, can you come up here and help? And I would go up there, and I wouldn't take him home. I never would take him home, because I didn't want him to be conditioned to think if he acted crazy or out of sorts, or if he had a meltdown, that he was just going to get to go home, because school wasn't always fun for him, and I'm sure it's not always fun for your kids either. And so I would go up there and just sit with him and talk to him and calm him down, and I would say, are you ready to go back to class? And he'd say no, and I'd say, all right. And we'd just sit there, and I'd say, are you ready now? Are you ready now? And I think just the boringness of being with me made him ready to go back to class, because I didn't do anything exciting or anything. I just stayed with him, right, to kind of calm him and to kind of get him away from the teachers and some of the other kids. One specific example was he got really angry and started melting down, and he used to have, or he still does, but it's very rare these days because he's learned to manage himself. He used to have a propensity for violence. Some of our kids don't understand there's a social line that's drawn that you can't step over, and Eric didn't know that line. And at one point, a teacher, this was a pretty difficult teacher that didn't have a lot of patience. He got escalated, and the teacher, instead of being calm, got frustrated and escalated with him. And Eric took a pencil and stabbed her in the hand with it. So I get a call that my son had stabbed a teacher. That was the call, right? So I'm in my car heading over that. I didn't know any details. I just knew he had stabbed a teacher. And, you automatically go to the worst case scenario when that type of thing happens. So I went over there and took care of it, learned what the situation was, and I never told my wife. There was a lot of things that would have hurt her deeply, and I had to find the right time to tell her that when those things happened. And that was one of them that I never told her. I just kind of forgot about it and went about things. And a few years later, I was with a group of people, and one of the people there knew about it and mentioned it to me. Said, do you remember, Eric stabbing that teacher in the hand? And my wife said, what? Right? She said, what? And it was right, and I had to say, it's okay. It was 5 years ago. And she's like, oh, okay, you took care of it? I'm like, I took care of it. Well, these things were crossing my mind, at about year 25 in our marriage. And I started to wonder, and this is going to sound silly to some of you, and to others of you, it's going to sound real, for real, right? Because I know a guy who, he called it enabling his wife, is what he called it. And so I went in to get some counseling from a good friend of mine who I really trusted, and was just a really good man. And I sat down with him and I said, I've got a question for you. I want to hear what you think about it. He said, what's that? I said, well, I take on a lot of things so that my wife doesn't have to. My wife was very sheltered as a young lady. She grew up in kind of a lot of things she never really knew or understood. She didn't need to in some cases. We'd be watching TV and somebody would say something that she wouldn't understand, that was sexual or something like that. And she might say to me, what does that mean, Kyle? And I would say, you don't really want to know. And she would say, okay. And she didn't want to know. She didn't care, right? She was perfectly happy living in the world she lived, right? Which was, she was very gullible. there was a lot of things. She didn't have a lot of street smarts because she just grew up in a very sheltered situation. And I sheltered her too, frankly. I sheltered her from a lot of stuff. My wife was super feminine, sweet, 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 so sweet. If you met her, you'd love her because you'd be like, dang, that's the sweetest girl I've ever met, right? And so I love that about her. I loved her sweetness, and I didn't want the world to sometimes the world can beat the sweetness out of you. And so I did a lot of things, and so I said, am I enabling her? Should I let her see more of the real world and suffer, not suffer, but learn to manage different things of this world? Am I doing her a disservice was my question. Am I enabling her and doing her a disservice by not allowing her to be stretched through, the hardships of the world? And he said something to me I'll never forget. And he said, you know what, Kyle? He said, you guys seem like you're pretty happy. And I said, we are. We have a top 1% happy marriage. And he says, my guess is you're really good at some things and she's really good at some things. And I said, that's true. And he says, my guess is she, even though you shelter her from some of the things of this world, my guess is that you don't have to deal with some of the things of this world. And I said, you know what, that's true, because she handles a lot of things. So I don't have to handle them. And he said, well, it sounds like to me you guys got a pretty good thing going. He says, I think you're a team, and I think you're kind of a cool team, and I think you should certainly prayerfully consider making some adjustments. He said, but I also think you should prayerfully consider that you're a great team, and you should do what you do good, and she should do what she does good. He said, but really the stewardship of your family falls on your shoulders. He said, my counsel to you is to pray about it. And if it continues to bother you, or continues to be a thought that you keep having, is to maybe address it again. He said, I just see two happy, loving individuals in a top 1% happy marriage, and I don't know why you would think that you have to let her face more things in life. And I so appreciated the way he handled that. He gave me counsel, which the counsel was, you guys got a good thing. And the counsel was, but it's up to you. It's your family. You have stewardship over your family. It's your decision, right? He didn't tell me what to do. He just looked at it from an outside view and told me what I should consider, which was fantastic. So my message for you today is, dads, driven autism dads, there are going to be some things that you're better at than her, and do them. Those are going to be some hard things too, right? There's some things that she's better at than you, and she should do those, right? You're a team. You do what you do best, and let her do what she does best. And if what you do best is managing really hard stuff so she doesn't have to, do that. She'll love you for it. She'll absolutely love you for it. And I know my wife loved me for it, and I loved her for the things that she did that I wasn't as good at. So my message is pretty simple today. Become a team. Rely on each other. Use each other. And step up and be the biggest part of you can as part of that team. And if you'll do that, I can promise you, your relationship will thrive. Be bigger than you think you are. Step into those really hard things. Don't force your wife to take on those hard things. If you can take them on, take them on. You're a man. Stand up and face it, and be the man. And that's my message for today. Hopefully that's helpful. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.